It is Friday, June 9th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, well, we got a lot to discuss this past week. Not only do we have a lot of interesting news stories to cover, but we also have our E3 predictions, so we'll do the news stories first, as always. Timestamp right here if you want to go right to the E3 predictions, but this will probably be a longer video for sure. So let's get into our first news story right away. Now, if you remember last week, we were talking about that gold PS4, which was technically a rumor at the time. Confirmed. That's kind of where we're heading with that news story. So yes, it is confirmed for the US. Starting basically today, you can get a 1TB gold PS4. What we didn't actually kind of see coming was in Europe, actually, on the 28th, you're going to get the gold PS4 in 500 gigs and a silver PS4 in 500 gigs, and the controllers are also sold separately, but I believe they've been offering the gold and silver controllers, if I'm not mistaken, for a while now. But yes, so those are new options for you. I still think the gold one actually looks pretty cool, and the silver one looks very sharp. Kind of very reminiscent of the early Batman Special Edition PS4, which was basically silver, but it had the Batman faceplate. But that was a nice looking console as well. So we got a PS Vita news story coming up. We don't talk about Vita that often anymore, and this is another one of those news stories that kind of solidifies why we don't talk about them anymore. Anyway, Sony Interactive Entertainment America President and CEO Shawn Layden and Jim Ryan of Sony were talking to The Verge this past week about PlayStation Vita and kind of why it pretty much didn't. Basically, they were saying, you know, Vita didn't reach critical mass, and it was something that they couldn't really focus on anymore, despite the fact that it's still doing quite well in Asia and it's a viable platform there. He basically, Shawn went on to say, Vita is still a viable platform, chiefly in the Japanese and Asian markets. We still have developers in Japan who are building for that platform, but it just didn't get over the hump in Europe and America. It's hard to know exactly why, but it didn't garner a large enough audience here for us to continue to build for it. To be honest, the Vita didn't reach critical mass in the US or Western Europe. I don't know if it was that it was more technology people had to carry around or more things to charge, or whether their phone and tablet were taking care of that, but once the content slowed in that pipeline, it became hard to keep the Vita as a going concern. We have covered this topic a number of times. We really have kind of beaten it to death. I keep saying sort of the same thing over and over again. I kind of feel like maybe we should just at some point do a separate video and kind of really go over it and analyze sort of Vita's, you know, birth to sort of not end necessarily, because that's something I always say. The Vita is not necessarily dead just yet. The platform is still going on, even though, yeah, in the West, it's pretty much nothing at this point. Although, as always, developers still make games for it. They actually still do well for it. They still turn a profit on it. Vita owners are very dedicated people that buy a lot of games, so it's still a good platform in that sense. And I still obviously love Vita as well. I actually just recently, this past week, finally started Persona 4 Golden on the system, which I bought new at the time, how many years ago when that game came out, and now I just fell down a rabbit hole, so I've been playing that like crazy. Part of the reason why I'm probably going to slack off another week for a Wednesday video. But it's just, that's the thing that's reminding me why Vita is such a great platform. But yeah, I kind of don't even want to get into it right now. We could do a separate video on kind of why Vita had the struggles that it did and whatnot. And so if we want to beat this horse again, we'll do that in another topic. But there is Shawn outright admitting, more or less, this is why we're just not sticking to this platform. And at the very least, you got to give Sony credit for being open about that. That's what I always say more than anything else. I appreciate, no matter what, when it's developer, a hardware manufacturer, publisher, being upfront with consumers and saying, this is why this is the way that this had happened, or this is why this turned out a certain way. Even when it's negative news and it's not something consumers want to hear, I always appreciate that transparency. Moving on to other tidbits from them talking to The Verge, they discussed how PlayStation VR sales are now well over 1 million, which we kind of already knew. We talked about previously. It wasn't like something that Sony, I think, outright confirmed, but it was pretty much like data was coming out. Like the last time Andrew House said it was like 900,000 units sold back in February, and then we learned more about how it sold another 400,000 in the first quarter, so obviously that puts it over 1 million. So that's not necessarily surprising news, although the one thing I did want to talk about is Sony revealed that as of November, or since November basically, 1 in every 5 PS4s being sold is a PlayStation 4 Pro. Basically putting it at, ooh, one of my lights just went out. Here, let me fix that. Funny enough, I've actually broken a few of these light bulbs from these studio lights, and this one actually, I broke it maybe 2 years ago in the socket, and now the bulb doesn't like firmly stay in it, so it's kind of loose. But anyway, so that puts it at about 20% since November that every PS4 being sold is a PS4 Pro. And they're also saying that about 40% of all PS4 Pro sales are actually upgrades, so current owners going to a Pro, which was a lot more than I thought. That's actually pretty interesting. Although, I don't know, I mean, I would have figured that maybe like 80-90% would be completely new owners, but yeah, a lot of people are actually upgrading. That tells us the whole mid-cycle update thing was certainly kind of the right direction to go in, but it's some of the sentiments that I've always kept saying to you, and certainly Sony says it as well, because they are actually seeing, apparently this is the Pro is doing more than they thought it would. So if you're looking at, you know, since November, 20% PS4 Pro sales, 40% of sort of upgrade cycle there, and they're saying that's well above their expectations, that means that Sony definitely made this machine thinking like, okay, this is not something that people are going to adapt to right away. It'll be sort of over time sort of situation, much like I've been saying for how long now. But interesting. Certainly, it's doing better for Sony than they initially thought, and I think it bodes well for sort of the idea of mid-cycle updates moving forward. It's still not something you have to do, but the option is there, and at some point it will make sense for somebody to get a Pro, or just skip the Pro entirely and go for an entirely new generation. It's an optional thing. You never have to do it. I think a lot of people are finally starting to get comfortable with it. And for Sony, they were kind of the first manufacturer to step forward and do it, and they kind of took all the shots. And that's something we'll get into in a second with the E3 stuff, which is that now Microsoft can kind of come in with the better console and say, you know, check out how cool this thing is. Nobody's going to care about the fact that it's a mid-cycle update anymore because it's more powerful, and that sort of ideas already, like that sort of hurdle's already over for people. Now, these next two news stories is still Jim Ryan and Shawn Layden, but this time they're talking to Time, and Jim Ryan was talking about PS4 sales and how well they're doing. As always, PS4 is doing quite well. Jim kind of went on to say that PS4 in North America against Xbox One is doing 2-to-1 sales lead, and Europe it's even stronger at a 3-to-1 sales lead. That's not entirely surprising. Europe has always had kind of a slighter lean towards PlayStation. And it's kind of the same thing we always talk about. PS4 is still doing pretty well. They've got some great momentum. Shawn Layden kind of discussed a Nintendo Switch a little bit. He said, you know, Nintendo's found great success, and he's not necessarily worried about Nintendo Switch, mostly because he kind of feels that it's a platform that people kind of buy hand in hand with other products, and Sony comfortably feels that, you know, people that are buying Switch are, you know, also PS4 owners, or they're going to be PS4 owners, you know, something of that nature. Now, what's going into the final news story, which I think is a more interesting discussion, is Jim Ryan made a very polarizing comment about backwards compatibility. Actually, it was kind of a big thing recently, because Ars Technica released an article earlier in the week about Xbox One's backwards compatibility statistics. Basically, they sampled about 900,000 to 1 million Xbox Live accounts over a period of 4 months, I believe, and kind of built up some data from that to show how many people are using backwards compatibility on Xbox One. And it turned out to be like a little over 1%, basically, which is basically amounts to nothing. Then you have a comment following up with Jim Ryan kind of discussing backwards compatibility on the PlayStation side of things, and said, yeah, basically he said this. He said, when we've dabbled with backwards compatibility, I can say it was one of those features that is much requested but not actually used much. Now we're going to stop there because, so yeah, put 2 and 2 together. Microsoft always gets a lot of goodwill for the fact that they did software emulation on Xbox One to get that backwards compatibility in there. So we've got those two varying perspectives right there. And also, Microsoft was very quick to, I believe it was Phil Spencer and Mike Yarba of Microsoft that quickly followed up with saying that that's not necessarily true with that small little sample size compared to how many Xbox Ones out there and how many people are playing. Phil said commonly there's still Xbox 360 games in the top 10 of most commonly played games, and Mike Yarba said the same thing. Basically, it's a lot more than that sort of data from Ars Technica suggests. Anyway, Jim Ryan ended this comment by saying that, and I was at a Gran Turismo event recently where they had PS1, PS2, PS3, and PS4 games, and the PS1 and the PS2 games, they looked ancient. Like, why would anybody play this? I first saw this news story and I was like, Jim, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? Why would you say something like that? That is, oh my god, that comment is in such poor taste, incredibly polarizing, somewhat demeaning, I guess, to people that actually are fully committed to video games and people that enjoy video games and actually enjoy this hobby. It was just, that's a very, very bad comment to say, you know? I mean, I'm sure he kind of just said it sort of, maybe he just wasn't thinking much of it, right? And, you know, maybe he's kind of, maybe it's like a sentiment of like all these, you know, a lot of those games don't really hold up anymore in terms of graphical fidelity, or maybe he's also talking from gameplay mechanics, but you can kind of see where he was going with that. That was just a very bad comment, and it was kind of the last thing I would expect such a high-profile person at Sony to say. That's just not something you want to put out there, especially when you're actively selling PlayStation 2 games, you're actively doing HD remasters and collections, and well, PlayStation now is purely PlayStation 3 games, but you know, you're doing remasters for, you just did the Rapper remaster. I mean, and granted, the remaster, so you're making them look better, but like, it's just not. It's just there's nothing good that comes from that comment. You know, it leaves a very sour taste in people's mouths. In fact, when I saw that comment, what I initially thought was, this sounds like something Sony would say in 2005, 2006, and the company acted very differently back then. So it was just a very weird comment, and I don't know, that just was not good at all. Cause everyone's going to take that the wrong way, and I certainly took it the wrong way, because I don't even need to explain it to you guys. If you like video games, I mean, who gives it? Old games are great. Some old games stand the greatest test of time in terms of how well they look and their gameplay mechanics, and some of the best games out there are games that were released 15, 20 years ago. It's just a bad comment. So I don't know why he would even remotely say something like that. If we want to go back to the discussion of backwards compatibility, though, this is something I've said a few times now, and I'm right there with Jim on that first statement. Backwards compatibility is a very vocal minority thing. The people that want it scream bloody murder for it, but at the end of the day, nobody uses it. People buy a new console to play new games, and that's just the way it is. Now, I don't even necessarily agree with the Ars Technica article that said, you know, it's like 1 point something % of people playing Xbox 360 games. I would assume that surely it's a little bit higher if you were to pool all, you know, Xbox One users, but it's still to that point. It's not something that is worth it, and that's why, you know, Microsoft did it at the time for Xbox One. They wanted goodwill with customers. They were getting their asses. They're still getting their asses handed to them. They wanted, you know, to start doing a lot of new positive things to make the console look a little bit better, and especially in terms of PR, because that's a very consumer-friendly thing for them to do. Especially when, let's say the numbers are that low for them, that it's like 1 point something %. That's investing a lot of money and resources and time and like all that's a lot of stuff you're putting in to what is essentially free. You know what I mean? Like, they're not seeing much out of that. How can you really calculate how well that's doing for you? How many, you know, can you correlate that feature coming to Xbox One with resurgence of Xbox One sales? You know what I mean? Because it's not something that they're seeing monetarily over time. You know what I mean? You can't measure that, and I think that's something that Sony always kind of agreed with as well. And it's another thing that people still don't seem to get. I still stand by it. I don't think there's any fucking way they can do PS3 backwards compatibility on PS4. If we're talking strictly PlayStation 3, I don't think they can do it. They've been pretty open about it. They said it's just like way too difficult. If you have a monster PC today, it is ridiculously hard to emulate a PS3 game, and it just does not work. It does not come out well, so to expect a PS4 to be able to do something like that, I think is just somewhat absurd and ridiculous. Now, if you want to talk the PS1 or PS2 side of things for software emulation, you know, they're trying to do they're doing the premium, you know, PS2 games in the PlayStation Store. Obviously, they want to do something that sees a little bit of return for them. And, you know, call me a corporate apologist if you want, but it's kind of clear to me why they aren't doing it. It probably wouldn't translate that many sales to them. It's probably way more time, money, and effort than it's even remotely worth for them, especially given the fact that they are still the front runner. They are doing so well right now. They're selling tons of PS4s. They're #1 in VR right now, technically, despite the fact that VR's got a very slow start. I'm sure they're very optimistic and happy with the position that they're in right now with VR. PS4 Pro sales are doing a lot better than they thought. I mean, this company is doing well. Why would they focus on something so trivial and something that they probably won't even be able to pull off with specifically PlayStation 3? It's so clear-cut, and people still kind of talk about it. You're like the 1%. If you had it, you wouldn't use it. Most people admittedly would not use it. People buy a PS4 to play PS4 games. But still, that comment from Jim Ryan, I couldn't believe it, dude. Like, why would you say something like that? Do you even work in the games industry? Do you even, like, do you play games yourself? Like, why would you say something like that? All right, anyway, let's get into our E3 predictions. Exciting times are upon us. Just coming up soon. Microsoft's conference is going to be on the 11th, 2 p.m. PST, 5 p.m. EST. Sony's conference is going to be on Monday, the 12th. You can expect them to start pretty late, around, I think it's 6 p.m. PST, and then it would be 9 p.m. EST. That would actually go into the 13th if you're over in Europe. But anyway, let's get into what I think Sony's going to do at their conference this coming Monday. Now, I'm slightly worried, but at the same time, like, optimistic. The past few years, you know, Sony has done quite a good job at throwing a lot of great surprises, a lot of things that people are excited for, and they've done really great shows. This year, I think they've got sort of an uphill battle because Microsoft is in a position where they're going to be showing off entirely new hardware, and people are going to be very excited about that. They actually also announced that their conference is going to be a little bit longer. There's rumors going around that the price for the Scorpio might actually be pretty competitive and less than $500, which would be nuts. I would actually be shocked if they were to pull that thing under $500. Apparently, they have a lot of games to show. Let's hope they actually do. That system needs games fast and soon, and they need good games. But I think, you know, they've got a lot that they're trying to fight for right now. Nintendo's got a lot of eyes on them too. They're going in there with the Switch that just recently launched, and a lot of people are excited to see reasons for owning that platform. And you've got the Sony side of things, where Sony's kind of on the mountaintop. They're doing well right now, but what is there going to, like, what are we going to see? And, you know, the thing is, we know that Sony's going to have a lot of games. You know, that's something we already know. They've got a bunch of exclusives coming out. Well, you would hope that we get an answer for when they're going to come out soon. It's just that these, you know, I would argue that with E3, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say E3 is the place where we want to see something entirely new. We want to be blown off our feet. We want to see something that we didn't see coming. So to spend a lot of time seeing games that we kind of already know about, I think would be a little bit of a mistake for them, despite the fact that we haven't seen a whole lot of God of War, or Days Gone, or Spider-Man PS4, or Dreams, or Detroit Become Human. I think spending, you know, a lot of time on all those games would not be in their best interest, because you want something new to be there. And what would that something new be? So, now, the great thing right off the bat is Kojima said he wasn't going to be there with Death Stranding. Thank God. I don't know why media outlets are giving it so much... Well, it's Hideo Kojima. That's why they're giving it so much attention. But Death Stranding, I want him to slow down on that. Stop talking about Death Stranding. We know that game is far out. Why do you keep throwing it down people's throats left and right? Just sit quietly and work on the game. Show us something when you have something. There's no reason to show us a new CGI trailer or, you know, a new teaser image. I mean, yeah, I get it. It's going to build up, but it's going to build up the game onto such a plateau, and it's just... It almost never works out for a lot of developers, and I know it's Hideo Kojima, but still, you're not even close to being ready with that game. So thank God that's not going to be there. But like I said, so we're probably going to see something... Actually, I think Insomniac already confirmed that they are going to be there with Spider-Man on stage, so you'll expect that to be there. I would hope for a release date. I would hope to see some, you know, extended gameplay of it. Now, Days Gone, we talked about that recently too. Days Gone, I think we'll get some more extended gameplay. We'll see a little bit more about that, maybe some more about the story or something like that. The fact that the first time we ever saw that game, we actually saw a pretty good clip of like what it looks like and kind of how the mechanics of the game work and whatnot, that tells us that maybe the game's further along than we already thought, so we might get a release date for that as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Something for like God of War. I think God of War is further out than we think. Same with Detroit Become Human. I would love to see that there, but I think they still need more time. Dreams, who knows what the hell's going on there. Maybe that title moved to PlayStation VR. That wouldn't surprise me if they did that, but I don't think they're going to be there at all either. If Sony spends any time on Knack 2, which, let's face it, this is Sony, they could certainly do something like that. I think that would be a mistake. I still think Knack 2 entirely is a mistake. Nobody asked for a sequel to that game. And I'm a person that actually genuinely enjoyed Knack 1, but I know when people don't want a game, they don't want Knack 2. Let's not forget, Sony has the partnership with Activision for Call of Duty, so we should expect Call of Duty World War II to make some sort of appearance and take up some stage time. The surprises, that's where I'm like kind of at a loss. I think we might see Sucker Punch's new IP. There's zero talk going on about this, but it's finally to that point. I think they're ready to show us something. Whether it's a teaser or full gameplay or You know, we get a name. I don't, you know, we're not going to get a release date or anything, but I want to see their new title, and I think now's the time to do it. They've had plenty of time since they last wrapped up First Light to have something that's probably showable to people, and to get that sort of train rolling for Insomnia or for Sucker Punch's next title. The whole Blood-Borne 2 thing, I'm like, you know what, I'm 50-50 on it, and here's why. I'm 150 me saying it's absolute bullshit, and another 50 of me is going, well, it's Sony, and I'm expecting them to not hold back, because they have been doing pretty well the past few years with these sort of left-field crazy good announcements. So I'm 50-50 on it, just based off those speculations alone. You know, Uncharted Lost Legacy is going to be due in a few months, so I think they're going to have at least a trailer for that. Kind of, you know, a new trailer, maybe some more gameplay or whatnot. Certainly they kind of have to shoehorn that in there, because the game is going to be releasing somewhat soon. Last of Us 2, I think it'd be a mistake to show it, because I feel like they're, you know, Naughty Dog's still, it's quite early for that game. I don't think they have a whole lot ready to show. So I kind of hope it isn't a situation where they build a teaser or something to show us. But if they have something to show us, that'd be great. I'm not expecting it. I guess it's another one of those things where I'm 50-50. If Sony wants it to be there, they'll get some sort of vertical slice to show people, just to, you know, get people pumped up. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier. That's going to be showing so much stuff that we've already seen before, and E3 is kind of always that place where people are excited because they want to see something new. And that's why I think Nintendo and Microsoft have a lot of steam going into E3, because they have this sort of these expectations, and I believe they're going to deliver them. So if we look at, say, Microsoft for a second, you know, they're going to be showing off the Scorpio in full depth. They're going to be showing the name of the thing, which they've already kind of trademarked a logo, and some of the teasers they've been releasing show the font that they're probably going to use for the thing. And like I said, the rumors are kind of pointing to maybe they will get under $500 or something, kind of a lower price point, which would be great for them, based off the fact that interest in PS4 Pro is actually much higher than Sony thought, so maybe the interest for Scorpio is going to be higher as well. Actually, if you kind of look at what Microsoft's doing with the whole unification of between Windows and Xbox, I think they're kind of going for a really kind of radically different approach where, and it's what I've been saying before, I don't think they're super concerned with Sony's numbers anymore. I think they're concerned with just getting people into the ecosystem of owning an Xbox and a PC, you know, buying their games and, you know, playing them in between that sort of in between that sort of environment. And the fact that Scorpio will be kind of this super huge powerhouse would maybe convince a lot of people to get that machine for the true 4K nature of that platform. And yeah, I think they will have to show some compelling games. So I'm going into it with slightly low expectations for Sony, I guess. I guess I'm preparing myself for an underwhelming conference. It'll still be exciting to see all the games that we already know are coming. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of what I'm echoing. I'm basing this off of how everybody always views E3, which is that people want those monster announcements, and they want something that's going to make their jaw drop. And when you see a game that we've already seen before, that is something where people go, oh yeah, it looks great, blah, blah. But then once the conference is over, they don't talk about the games that we already knew about. They always talk about, did you see the new game? Did you see new X? Did you see new Y? That's the kind of stuff people do. And that's what always breeds the conversation of who won E3. So I just think this is a show for Microsoft and Nintendo to kind of steal, and hopefully Sony has something good up their sleeves. Those are some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. So yeah, follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan. I will be live tweeting all these conferences. I maybe you know, won't be super active on like EA or something, but the Microsoft conference for sure, I'll be live tweeting a storm during that conference. You guys can watch that with me, and, you know, kind of refresh the Twitter feed and check out all of our reactions together. And of course, Sony, I will be doing it as well. Right after Sony's press conference, I'll be doing the recap and impressions video as always, which this time, once again, they have a pretty late show, so the video won't go up until well into, you know, the AM, at least for where I live. But that is something that we will always do. So follow me if you want to get in on all the action. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you guys this weekend and Monday/Tuesday for the E3 awesomeness.